just say a hearty good morning and welcome to you all. Delighted to see you all here. My name is Carl Blake. I'm the Network Manager of Galway Executive Skillnet, so I'm hosting this session and I'll shortly introduce our main speaker, James. Just before I do so, just in terms of etiquette, a couple of things. Firstly, we are recording this session, just note that, because we have a lot of interested parties, particularly from the sporting community, who are busy training, doing their day job as it were, so they can't be live, but they'd like to catch up with us. And secondly, in terms of questions and answers, James's presentation will last give or take 40 minutes, and we will have a Q&A slot at the end of that. So there's a slide here that James is going to bring up, which basically explains how we do that. One of two ways. One, use the chat box throughout the presentation. So if you can please keep yourselves on mute so there's no background noise, and give James a free run in his presentation. But type into the chat box as you go if you want to ask a question, and I will moderate that at the end. Alternatively, we'll invite questions from the floor during the Q&A, which will be give or take about 15 minutes. So take your pick, and if you want to do that, just click the raise hand function, and you can use your video cam. So briefly, the context here, folks. So Galway Executive Skillnet, many of you know us, but if not, we're a training network that have been delivering quality, relevant training interventions to the local business community in Galway and the West for give or take 17, 18 years. We are funded by an organisation called Skillnet Ireland, who in turn get funded through the Department of Education and Skills. And obviously, pretty much everything at the moment that we do is online. And it ranges from short, sharp, 1-hour interventions exactly like this, or we have some more longer term certified programs and plenty in between. But one of our remits is to try and be innovative and come up with new ideas and themes. And I've certainly myself have long held this passion or interest in the links between the world of sport and business. And that's shared by some of my steering committee, a few of whom, most of actually are on the call this morning, particularly Christy O'Hara and Rory Cookie, worked with me recently to develop this. So we've come up with this concept called Game Changers. And this is the first in a series that we are going to be running. And it's very simply to explore what are the key success factors in the world of sport, and in particular, how that maps into the world of business. So we've two basic audiences, if you like, here. The first is just the business community. Whether you're running your own business, you're a manager or employee, whatever, what can you learn from an elite sports person and their experience? And the second key audience is sports persons, for whom it's either a full-time profession, semi-profession, or a serious amateur enthusiast. Like, for example, like we would have some recent GAA inter-county players I know on board this meeting, and I think we all know that while it's amateur in name, the level of dedication involved, it's absolutely massive. And so when you're performing at that elite level, or on the tennis court or whatever it might be, what skills and knowledge and even attitude disciplines have you acquired, that how can you retain those and use them in a career? And clearly for us, the best way to address these questions is to hear from somebody who's been there, done that. And that's why it's my really great pleasure to introduce to you, as I say, our first speaker in our Game Changer series, an elite high performance athlete. So I'm introducing you now and handing over to James Cluskey, who is a former Irish tennis professional and Davis Cup player. James, delighted you can join us, and it's all yours.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks for asking me to speak today, and thanks to Christy as well for approached me about this initially, and really interesting what you've just talked around lessons from sport into business. I've been lucky enough through my career to play at an elite level in tennis, and also spend time with some of the best tennis players in the world. And then, as you'll see through my presentation, also meet some of the best business people in the world as well. So just to get started, I suppose, I'm going to touch on a few different things within my 35-40 minutes with you guys, and hopefully you have a lot of questions as well, which I'm delighted to answer. In terms of high performance, I always think what is high performance, and the definition is to achieve a high standard, to excel and exceed expectation. But what does that actually mean? So for me, as a former professional athlete, I always thought about the word success and what is success, and how do we define that, and quote unquote, is someone successful, and how that looks, and so on. So that's something that I've always thought about. And when I was 14 or 15, I was actually introduced to this person. Does anyone on the call know who this is? If anyone does, and it's unlikely in an Irish audience as well, just to make you feel better. So this is a guy, John Wooden. He's a legendary UCLA basketball coach. He died a couple of years ago at the age of 99. If you like watching sports documentaries and reading books, he has phenomenal content around coaching. He's considered the Alex Ferguson of coaching, or Vince Lombardi, and he was voted the best coach in America. And I always loved his quote about success. And if you go to the Tennis Ireland National Tennis Centre, on the wall, they asked some of the players to give their favorite quotes. And this quote is the one that I used. So his quote is, "Success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction, of knowing you did your best to become the best you're capable of becoming." So I always thought about that as a tennis player. I'll get into my background in a little bit, but as a tennis player who was 145 in the world, was I successful? I wasn't number one in the world. I didn't win Wimbledon, but I feel that I was successful because I gave my absolute best in terms of my career. So I love that quote. So again, success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction, of knowing you did your best to become the best you're capable of becoming. So Wooden was asked in an interview, he was asked, "Who's the most successful player you've ever coached?" And he said, "Well, that's a really difficult question. Was it the guy who came onto the team who was a star player, who was always going to be a star player? Or was it the guy who came onto the team who actually wasn't recruited, that, he wasn't that sought after, but within a certain amount of time became a serious contributor on the team?" So I always think about that, especially as it relates to my career, and was I successful? So I know Pat Lam would be quite famous where you guys are, and Pat Lam is a big fan of John Wooden. He used it with Connacht Rugby, and now he's at Bristol. And a lot of coaches would use a lot of John Wooden content. And again, I'll get into my background, but my coach in college used to use Wooden stuff as well. So Wooden designed something called the Pyramid of Success, which can be used with individuals and with teams, whether it's in corporate or in sport. And essentially what the pyramid is what Wooden talks about is what are the cornerstones, what are the key components that is going to make a team successful. So if we look at the pyramid, you see enthusiasm, cooperation, loyalty, friendship, industriousness, self-control, alertness, initiative, intentiveness, team spirit, skill, condition, poise, confidence, faith, patience, and all these things lead to competitive greatness. So the point is as a team, can you be successful if there's not a good team spirit, or if people are not enthusiastic? The answer is yes, you can be successful, but the problem comes is that if you start to miss a lot of those different cornerstones, those different blocks, that's when the pyramid starts to collapse. So again, it's about, and you'll see as I kind of go through my stuff around goal setting, the small details or the small key components that are going to quote unquote lead to that success at the end. So I would recommend, if for me, success in terms of this presentation to you guys, if you could take one or two lessons from my journey, that would be amazing for me. And one thing I would say is that if you do like watching documentaries and reading good books, someone to research is John Wooden. So in terms of my own background, Carl mentioned very briefly, I started playing tennis at the age of, I was 6 years old. I started in the Parks tennis program, which I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with. In terms of sport, how does it happen? Kind of one thing leads to another. So I started in the Parks, was quite good, and then ended up, getting selected for the Leinster squads, and it kind of went from there. A big thing that happened was when I was 14, a coach moved from Canada, a guy Larry Jervich, and he took over as a tennis director in a club called Westwood Clontarf, which had 7 indoor courts, which was a big kind of, I suppose, point in my life that it was very lucky that someone like Larry had came to Ireland. He was a great coach, but he's a really good person as well. And I think thinking back on it, it's just so important that you have good mentors and people looking out for you along the way. And Larry was really that for me. So my ranking in Irish tennis was always around I was always in the top 4. And then between 16 and 18, I kind of moved up to number 1 in Ireland, number 1 or 2. I was recruited by a few American colleges. The plan was always to go to college in America. I had scholarship offers from Indiana, Louisiana, and Pepperdine, which is in California. When I actually started to give talks from time to time, I actually thought about this a little bit. And my decision was really go to LSU or go to Indiana. Indiana was ranked 60 in the country. There's 12 guys on the team, 6 guys play. Louisiana was ranked 10 in the country, 12 guys on the team, 6 guys play. My option was go to Indiana and I would be the number 1 or number 2 player on the team, or go to Louisiana and I'd be number 6 on the team. And I'd really have to fight for my spot. And I think I mentioned a little bit later, but around kind of, surrounding yourself with people you want to become. That's always been my philosophy. And my idea was, look, I need to get around good players. I need to train with good players. So that's why I went to LSU. My collegiate career, I was ranked 3 in America. It was an All-American over there. So I had a pretty good college career and enjoyed my time in the Deep South. The plan was always to play professionally after that. So I finished playing college the end of 2009, played professionally from 2010 to the end of 2015. As Carl, I think, mentioned, my career high ranking was 145 in the world, which I always say to kind of non-tennis people, that in football terms or in soccer terms, I played in the championship, had some kind of big days out and had again, if I come back to that success piece, I feel like I was successful in that I did my absolute best. I was also lucky enough to represent Ireland in Davis Cup for 9 years. So I was a part of the team for a long time. So I wanted to talk about kind of what's worked in terms of my journey and what lessons you could take from that. So the first piece is really around goal setting. So when I finished college in the end of 2009, started on the Pro Tour, my initial target was, I need to make 250 in the world, have to be inside 250. Just to give context, there's probably about 1,400 players. So there's, 4,000 players who kind of play. And then there's probably 1,400 that are ranked or 1,500 that are ranked at any one time. My target was I need to get inside 250. The goal of being inside 250 was very much around funding because the Sports Council at the time were giving funding for that. So just to give you a little bit of context on that. Now, I mentioned that I was number 3 in America. I should have come out of college and I should have really rocketed up the rankings because my playing, I was good enough to do that. However, I really struggled performance-wise. I was having very mixed results. One week I'd do well, the next week I'd lose, and so on. So what the shift was is I was actually introduced to a business coach / sports psychologist, and he had a huge impact. And I remember actually he had absolutely zero tennis background, and I remember thinking, what is this guy going to teach me about performance and reaching my ranking? But what he did was ask me some really simple, basic questions. And he asked me, James, how many points do you need to make it to be inside 250 in the world? So I knew loosely I knew how many points I needed. And if you look at the triangle there, the 15, the 27, if I was to go and play in France next week and I win my first round and I lose in the second round, I get 15 points. If I was to lose in the semifinals, I get 27. If I was to make the final, I get 45. And if I win the event, I get 80 points. So pre-meeting Kevin, who's the sports psychologist, business coach, I would go to these events and I just put so much pressure on myself to win. I just add all this pressure. And my performance suffered. So what Kevin asked me to do was actually break down look, how many points do you need to make? And also mentioned, you know, if you play 30 tournaments in a year, things are going to go wrong, right? You're going to get sick one week. You're going to get a bad line call. You're going to get, you know, stuff happens and you can't control that. That's out of your control. So I then created this results pyramid, or the results that I needed. And now it almost liberated me that I would go to a tournament in France and I might win my first round and I get those 15 points and I lose in the second round, but I tick off my 15 and I feel like I'm moving that one step closer to my goal. So we would come further back from that. You know, I would say in terms of goal setting, I would say, look, what is the vision? What is the big goal? What am I trying to achieve? So at that time, it was to be inside 250 and then work backwards from that goal as far as I possibly can. So it really went into, you know, what are the things that I can do on a daily basis? How many serves do I need to hit a week? How many times do I need to go to the gym? You know, what exactly can I control? And then I would literally tick those things off. And it really gave me the confidence that I felt like I was moving closer to my goal. That really, really helped me in terms of goal setting. I also, in terms of handling failure. So this is an interesting one. I was lucky enough to make it inside 250. I made it to 145, as I said. And in terms of goals, I became obsessed with you know, and I still am obsessed with goals. So I did things like I changed my passwords on my, you know, on my computer initially to I will be 250. So I really wanted to kind of get in the mindset that I was going to hit that goal. So when I hit that 250, then I sat down and I said, okay, what do I need to do to be inside 200 was the next goal. And obviously it gets harder as you go up the rankings. So in terms of goal setting, that really, really helped me. But we all know, as everyone, I think everyone's learning resilience in abundance at the moment. But, you know, sometimes you don't make your goals. So in 2012, I was about 150. I had about 6 weeks to go to Wimbledon, or maybe about 8 weeks to go to Wimbledon. I went to Uzbekistan, to Kazakhstan, and to China for a couple of weeks to play. Needed to make solid results and basically missed the goal. So I ended up missing Wimbledon by one spot in 2012. So I was there on site, was one out. Really disappointing, pretty tough to take. You know, and I was thinking about this in terms of like, how do you bounce back from that? And for me, it was all around, I would take a few days off, I'd sit down again and I'd say, okay, this is where I am and this is where I need to go. And how do I move forward from here? You know, so for me, that was difficult, but I got through it. I would say at the moment, in terms of goal setting, it's very difficult to set long-term goals just with what's going on in terms of lockdown and COVID and stuff. So for me, it's in terms of goals at the moment, it's okay. So what can I do in the next few weeks? You know, during this lockdown, what can I achieve? What does success look like for me? What do I need to have done in the next few weeks? So I missed Wimbledon by one spot in 2012. I played more doubles than singles, and the way it works is that if I'm 145 in the world and I play with Roger Federer in Wimbledon and he's number one in the world, you add both rankings. So we would be 146 combined. So I signed in with a Belgian player, Ruben Bemmelmans, and we missed the draw by one spot basically. So essentially what that means that is if someone got injured or sick, we would get in, and you know, I don't want to ruin the story, but we didn't get in anyway. And I also remember one funny thing that actually happened, which I kind of laugh about now, is I remember being disappointed not to get in. We were one out, and I went to the transport office and I said, can I get a car to take me to the train station? And the guy looked at me, he said, are you in the tournament? And I said, I'm actually one out. And he said, oh, sorry, yeah, it's players only. So so that always kind of stayed with me. But so I wanted to talk a little bit around just I suppose the lessons that I would have learned and the lessons from sport that are that I've taken with me along the way. You know, I think there's a lot of things that I would have learned and that I've taken along. I spoke about resilience. I'll speak a little bit around networking and different things as well. I think one thing for me is the imposter syndrome piece. I think that's something that we all go through, and that I definitely went through as a tennis player. As an Irish tennis player, there's not many Irish tennis players out there. The first level of tournaments is called futures, and essentially, I remember going firstly to futures and really feeling, am I good enough to be here? Am I a strong enough player to be at this level? And then you kind of go through that, and you get to the stage where you're actually winning the futures events. And if I didn't win the tournament, I would be, I was expecting to win. I was going there to win. And then you move up to the next level along the way, and it's called challengers in tennis. And I had the same kind of going to the tournament and not feeling like I belonged there. And then I got to the stage where I won a couple of challengers, was doing quite well. And then I reached the ATP, the highest level, and I played a couple of main draw events on the ATP tour, and I still went through the same thing, and I kind of recognized that. And then I went into business, and I definitely felt the same kind of imposter syndrome when I initially started going to meetings, thinking, am I good enough to be here? Do I belong here? And so on. And I think I started to realize that, from speaking to people, that everyone goes through these things. But I think tennis and I think sport really teaches you a lot. And you're really, I suppose you're under the cosh in terms of performance, and you're examined every week in terms of your performance. And so I've taken those lessons with me. I wanted to talk a little bit around this guy on the right, Chris Sacca. Again, sport and business. I think the lessons are very similar. And I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of really successful business people, and there's so many similarities between the people. So I managed to spend a week with this guy, Chris Sacca, and I'll talk about my Richard Branson lessons in a little bit. But Chris came to Necker Island, and I was lucky enough to be coaching there at the time. And he had the most successful fund in history. So he was an early stage investor in Uber, in Instagram, and all these tech companies. And one thing, and again, I'd recommend, actually, there's a lot of YouTube interviews with him. But one thing he talked about was when he worked early in Google, and he said he used to say to the senior people, can I sit in on these meetings? Can I sit in on the meeting? And he said they looked at him and kind of like, well, why do you want to come to this meeting? And he said, no, I really want to learn. I'll take notes, and I really want to learn. So he used to go and sit in the meetings, and he said he learned so much from sitting in on these meetings and soaking it up. And for me as a tennis player, that was kind of my philosophy, that I wanted to get around the best players. I wanted to hang around the best players, and I wanted to learn from them. And I think that's a lesson that I've definitely taken with me from sport into business. And I've noticed that the best business people, as in a Chris Sacca, does that as well. So again, I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but I think one of my favorite quotes is, surround yourself with the people you want to become. If you look at my career in terms of tennis, my philosophy was always, okay, how do I get around the best players, and how do I soak up that information and learn from them? In Ireland, I was a big fish in a small pond. So what I did was I ended up going to India. I went every Christmas for a couple of years to do a pre-season camp. As I said, at the time I was probably about 250 in the world, and my friend was about, I think, 180. And he said to me, look, do you want to come to India and do a pre-season camp with Mahesh Bhupathi and Rohan Bopanna, who were top 5 in the world doubles players, and come and do a camp with them for a couple of weeks? I went there for Christmas. I jumped at the opportunity. And I find it hard to kind of, I suppose, articulate, but in a lot of ways, I feel like I learned more or as much from those guys off the court as I did on it, if that makes sense. Just the way they hold themselves, the way they ask questions, and so on. So for me, it's always been around, okay, surround yourself with the people you want to become. In terms of business, I've taken that lesson into business. I've thought, okay, I'm trying to build my company. Who are people that have been successful in their fields, and how can I, I suppose, how can I ask them for mentorship and learn from them and so on. So the person on the right there is a lady, Dr. Betty Uri. She wrote a book called Values. I was lucky enough to meet her through tennis as well. And, she talks a lot around values and around, people who mentor you, they should have the same values as you. And she also introduced me to something called the Internal Boardroom, which I think is a brilliant concept. She said to me one day, James, who's on your boardroom? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, companies have their boards, right? Each company has a board. They have their directors. She said, who's on your board? So who are the people that you can go to that can give you advice and you can ask for support? So I've always thought about that. Who are the people that are vouching for you? Who are the people in your corner, and so on? So she was someone that was great. Building relationship value. There's a great book which I love. It's called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. It's a book on networking. And as a tennis player, I learned how to network as a tennis player, because I was an Irish person going to tournaments on my own. I had to get out. I had to go and meet people, and I learned the skills. I learned those business skills with a tennis racket. And one of the things that Keith Ferrazzi talks around is building relationship values. So he says, look, if I meet someone at a conference tomorrow, if I meet Carl and I've never met him before, and he says to me, here's my card, about a week later, I might look at that card and think, who's that guy, Carl? And our relationship value would be a 1. So Ferrazzi talks about how do you get it to a 5 out of 5? And a 5 out of 5 would be, can you call someone on a Sunday afternoon and say, hey, I need your support with something? So the person on the right, a guy, Tim Gannon, he's the founder of Outback Steakhouse, which I'm sure people might have eaten in America. It's a very famous, it's like a TGI Fridays. And I was lucky enough to meet him. I kept in contact with him. And it's just an example of someone who I actually probably moved the relationship value from a 1 to a 5. He ended up inviting me to his house in Florida, but it took time. That relationship took investment. And I'm fascinated by networking and how you how you build relationships with people. So my story with him was I met him, loosely kept in touch, and he didn't really get back to me that much. And then he was getting an award with the Ireland Funds, and he invited me to Florida. So I always think about, in terms of networking, and it was the same in tennis as it is in business, I think about the relationship value and how can I move that forward. Again, the events alone, I think this is a little bit, I put this in, but I also think in terms of networking and lessons from sport, I always kind of like to not be on my own, but I think in terms of events, I thought, if I go with people, I end up talking to those people in the corner. And if I go on my own, I end up obviously having to go out and meet people. And it was the same in terms of tennis. When I went on my own to events, I needed to go and find people to train with and practice with and so on. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit around my lucky story in a lot of ways. In 2015, I was retiring from tennis. I heard about this event called the Necker Cup, which is essentially Richard Branson has a tennis event on his island, where he brings some of the best tennis players in the world and some of the best business people. And they play in this casual pro-am on his island. So Richard's a big tennis fan. It's, Rafael Nadal, Martina Navratilova, Novak Djokovic, these kind of players, and basically people that have won Grand Slams. I heard about this event and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I'd love to get involved in this. And I basically, a cold call, I would say it was a lukewarm call. I called the founder of the event. And I know there's people probably on here who think, they're thinking I should make this call today, but I'm not sure if I should, or maybe they're apprehensive about it and so on. I would say pick up the phone and call someone, because when I think about, in terms of my own career, where this one phone call has led to, it's incredible. So I ended up going to the event in 2015. My pitch was, I'll stand on the tennis court all day, so you'll never be short. You'll never be short a pro when Nadal is off, kind of having his drinks at the bar. I'll stand there. So I was lucky enough to meet Richard in 2015. Just again, kind of an Irish story, but at the bar on Necker, and chatted with him. And then probably about a month and a half later, I got an email from a guy, Kenny, who runs Necker, who runs the island for Richard. And he said, would I be interested in coming back and coaching him tennis? So I've done it, 6-7 times, where I'd go for a month and play tennis with Richard twice a day. And obviously that's where I met Chris Sacca and so on. So I always keep a journal when I'm there, and I always try and capture the lessons that I would have learned from him. So just to try to summarize these in a couple of ways. So it would be, when I'm there, it would be 1-to-1 with him, and I would have spent a significant amount of time with him at this stage. So in terms of the lessons, be on time. So not to criticize anyone who was late this morning, but my experience with Richard is that he is always on time. I can only remember once where he was late, and he came down with a couple of sheets of paper and he said, I'm really sorry I'm late. Is there any way you can read this chapter in my book and just tell me what you think about it? So my experience with him is he's religiously on time. Very simple, but saying thank you. Small kind of story around that. I remember he said to me one day around what he was curious on what racket he should be using. And I said, look, I have a friend who owns a tennis shop. I'll ask him to send over a couple of rackets. And so my friend Will sent over a couple of rackets, and Richard said to me, he said 2 things. He said, make sure he sends me the bill. Don't want it for free. Everyone's trying to make a living. Second thing he said was, email me his email. So I emailed Richard his email, and about 2 days later, I get a message from Will, and he thinks his friends have created this fake email address anyway, as a prank. But it was an email from Richard saying, dear Will, thank you very much for sending over the rackets. Going forward, you'll be my racket consultant. All the best, Richard. And for me, in terms of lessons from him, I don't spend time with him and think he's a genius, but his strength is with people, and his ability with people, and to kind of get the best out of people. The importance of well-being, especially obviously at this time in terms of what we're going through. But I did 30 days with him last year, and I played tennis with him 28 of those 30 days, twice a day. When it comes to his physical fitness, he's incredible. And I remember asking him, and he said, look, I feel more productive work-wise if I'm physically active, which I thought was interesting. And obviously the research backs that up. Moving this slide along. And just before I move on to the feedback piece, one thing I really noticed about him is he never has a phone with him as well. So when you're on the island, he's very present with you. And I find that when I went to kind of corporate meetings in Dublin, you might meet someone and they have their phone on the table and it's flashing, or they might answer a call and so on. And we all, we're all guilty of it from time to time. But one thing I picked up was, I suppose 2 things is, one is, here's one of the busiest people in the world, yet his fitness is non-negotiable. He's always active. And the second thing is, here's one of the most busiest people in the world, and he doesn't have a phone with him at all times. Ask for feedback. He's very, very good at kind of, I would host the tennis event for him every time I'm there. And it's kind of the only time where I'm a little bit stressed, because there's a lot of players. And at the end of every single event, he'd come on the court, he'd put his arm around you, he'd say, well done, 3 cheers for James, brilliant tennis event, thank you so much. And then you might sit with him later in the evening and he'd say, that was really good. Is there any way we could do this? Or what do you think about this? Just his way of framing feedback to people is something that I've really picked up on. Take a day off. We all should obviously listen to that if we can. But he would be very kind of, he would say to me, like, are you enjoying the island? Are you working too hard? Make sure you take some time off, and so on. And I think, in terms of that piece, I think sports people can really learn from that as well, because I think sometimes, the narrative is that you push as a professional athlete or as a business person. And I think the piece that I really learned from him around that, and what's come into sport much more, is just that recovery piece and just that resting piece, that you can actually, if you're getting good sleep and you're giving yourself time to recover, that you're going to be more productive than if you're, flogging a dead horse, for want of a better word, that you're working almost too hard. And I think the narrative is like, you need to kill yourself. But what I noticed with Richard was that he works incredibly hard, but he also has fun as well, and he does look after himself. So I just wanted to open up for questions, but just to kind of go through a little bit around, I suppose, what we spoke about, the topic of high performance, around success, and I would recommend looking at John Wooden, The Pyramid of Success, looking into some documentaries on him. Be very relevant in terms of sport and business. Around goal setting, I think, for me, in terms of sport and business, goal setting is very similar. One of the guests on Necker, I met a tech entrepreneur. I kind of stole that line from him, where he said, what is the goal, and work backwards from that, or what is the vision and work backwards from that. So for me, in terms of goal setting, obviously it's a little bit more challenging at the moment. I would say in terms of goals, I would look at immediate goals. What can I accomplish in the next couple of weeks? Because obviously the uncertainty in terms of going into the future. But I would say really get clear on that, get clear on the vision. In terms of the lessons on the career transition, lessons that I really learned from great tennis people and then great business people as well. And I really think the similarities are very strong. And then lessons from Richard Branson. Again, I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time with him. I would say, for me, if you ask me, my big takeaway from him was, it's his people skills, and it's his ability to kind of to get the best out of people. And I never sat with him and thought, wow, this guy is intellectually an absolute genius. But his ability to get the best out of people was something I really related to, and I thought was amazing. So for me, success on this is if you can take one or two things into whether you're a sports person or into your business. Happy to open it up for questions if anyone wants to start off with a question. I see we have a couple of chats in there, but thanks again for joining me, and thanks to Carl for asking.
Thanks a million, James. Brilliant stuff. So many things there, angles that we could pull up on. So again, just to repeat what James said there and what I said earlier, I was reminding in the chat. If you want to type in a question, I'll moderate it. A couple of people have come back to me with a direct question, and or if you want to raise a hand and actually ask a direct question for interaction. Might just open with one, James. You have some great insights there into the mindset of Branson. What's he like as a learner who you coach? Is he receptive to your coaching, or is he a difficult student?
Yeah, it's actually a fascinating question, because I think people learn in different ways. And one thing I would say on that is I actually did a tennis podcast to kind of bring it full circle. I did a tennis podcast a couple of weeks ago, and one of the guys who runs an academy in Spain, he actually said to me that I ask a lot of questions. That's one thing he noticed about me, was I asked a lot of questions. And what I noticed about Branson is, on the tennis court, he is very competitive. So he likes to play points. He likes to kind of get into points, basically. So that would be one thing which stands out, which obviously relates to business in a lot of ways, that he's competitive. The second thing would be he would ask a lot of questions. He'd be more kind of feeling based, as in you'd kind of tell him, use your legs and so on. And I say that because Josh, who's the coach on Necker usually, was telling me that Bill Gates actually Bill Gates plays a lot of tennis as well, and Bill Gates came there. And I said to Josh, what was Bill Gates like? And he said, geez, he asked a lot of like very technical questions. So Bill Gates is very, okay, what degree does my elbow need to be here, and so on, whereas Richard would be the opposite of that. He'd be much more around feeling. So I think it depends on, I think everyone learns in different ways. And I think it's interesting how different people consume information, really.
Great stuff. So a few other questions coming in. So Rory asks, what are the common traits or characteristics that you found between successful business people and successful sports stars?
Yeah, good question as well. Look, I think there's a lot. I think, I see a question around imposter syndrome there, but I think belief is one thing, that business people, I think that vision and believing in the vision and going after that vision. Like if you look at, say, the founder of a company like Airbnb, Brian Chesky, like he pitched Chris Sacca for investment. They pitched loads of VCs for money, and 90% of them said this idea is absolutely bonkers. It's never going to work. But he obviously believed in that vision. And I think a lot of sports people, I think, in terms of sports people going after their goal and saying, I'm going to be number one in the world, or I'm going to, win a Grand Slam, or whatever it is, like, I think you have that unshakable kind of grit and determination. And I would say that with a caveat that, like, we all have our doubts along the way, and we maybe successful people don't show that as much, but I think that probably grit is probably the word I would use in terms of similarities, if I could sum it up.
Great stuff. And I think it's very evident from your presentation that the bottom line here is that success on the field of play or on the court, those factors lie in the office or the boardroom. Isn't that it?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that. And I think in terms of transition, I think one of the difficult things, and I say this from personal experience, is, as a sports person, it was very clear, right? I'm 250 in the world, or I want to play Davis Cup for Ireland, or whatever it is. I could see the mountain, and I knew exactly what I needed to, what I was climbing. And my ranking, I'm tested every week in terms of performance. Whereas when I went into business initially, it was kind of, and I think this would be more relevant for the sports people, but it was almost like, well, what is the mountain that I'm climbing? What is the vision that I'm trying to achieve, right? And you can kind of float around a little bit, where you're actually trying to figure out, like, look, what actually gets me up in the morning? Like, I used to, I don't want to say I used to jump out of bed, but I used to get out of bed early to go and play tennis and train and stuff, because the vision was so strong of what I wanted to achieve. And I think in business, it took me a little bit of time, and I think it takes sports people some time. But once they find, whether it's within a company or whether it's somewhere else, but once they find something that really, drives them and it gives them purpose, I think that's the key. Like,
yeah, great stuff. So yeah, a few other great questions. You mentioned one of them about imposter syndrome. This one comes from Diane, and Diane, I totally relate to you. You say that it's something that we all feel at times, and you're being very honest. We all do at times. So the question, James, is, what steps do you think that one can take to overcome imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, I think recognizing it is a big thing. I mean, pre-COVID, I hosted a lot of events with CEOs and stuff, and I remember asking the question, and one of the CEOs said, "It's to recognize that we're all trying to figure it out, and we all do it, and you're not unique to it." I think that was a big thing, and learning from it. And then the second piece, I think, for me, I think I touched on in the presentation, was the internal boardroom. Who are the people who are the mentors or the business people that you can have that confidential conversation, whether it's a business coach or whether it's a friend or whoever. But I think we all need people that we can kind of, a mentor that we can talk to. And from my own sporting experience, with the Irish team, we had a sports psychologist, and what I found with that was, if you equate the Irish team with being a company, I was struggling with my serve for one tie, and it was the Monday and the match was on the Saturday, and I was quite nervous. And I remember thinking, if I go to the coach or the manager about this, he potentially could drop me, and he'd probably be right. If I went to the other guys in the team, they would have doubts about me. Whereas I found such power kind of in having the sports psychologist or sports psychologist that I could speak to in the hotel, that I knew it was confidential, and I could say what I was going through, and they could ask me little questions, put me, kind of self-assure me. So I think it's really important to have someone like that.
Yeah, very good. And it just actually reminds me, somebody else who I think is well known to you, who's featured a lot on our network, is Jerry Duffy, the speaker and endurance athlete. And Jerry, he, at a recent session that we had, he talked about something there, which I think is relates to exactly what you said and answered Diane's question around to fuel your self-belief. The point is that we all have, as you say, moments of doubt, imposter syndrome, feet of clay, whatever. But he told us in a session recently, and it's in one of the chapters in one of his books, is do a list of your greatest achievements. Write it down. It might be 5, 10, whatever it is in your life. And he says, keep it with you. And when you're having a moment of doubt, just dust that down and have a look. And, whoever you are out there, I know a lot of you people, you have a huge amount of achievements. So I thought it was a really good little reminder to deal with those moments of doubt.
Yeah, no, I know Jerry quite well as well. Yeah, he's very, very good and very good insight.
Yeah. Another couple of great questions. Linda is one of our committee. Good to see you again, Linda. She's asking you, James, if you agree with the Timothy Galway quote that the opponent inside your head is more formidable than the one the other side of the net.
I do, yeah, and it's a great book, The Inner Game of Tennis, which is very, it's a great book to read in terms of business context as well. If you ask me around regrets in my tennis career, on the question of was I successful, I would say yes. I'm pretty confident I got to the highest ranking I could get, but I definitely think, when I got into those kind of ATP events, which is the very highest level, I probably didn't have the belief that I probably should have had, and I think it's definitely in the head, and it's something that if I could go back, I would do differently, but easier said than done as well. But I do think, yeah, like in tennis and sports particularly, a lot of it is, it's in our head, and we can see in whether it's golf, whether it's football, anything, we can see what pressure does, So.
So the book there is called the Inner Game of Tennis. Inner
Game of Tennis, yeah, Tim Galloway. It's one of the most famous coaching books really in the world, I would say.
Brilliant stuff. We'll just
well worth the watch.
Brilliant. We'll type it into chat. My committee are very active this morning. Good to see you guys. Chris Doherty, really impressed by the presentation and on the area of. He's struck by the parallels of what we're talking about, parallels in goal setting between sport and business. And he understands the motivation for you to reach, say, the top 200 might be its own reward. But he's wondering, how did you reward yourself or those in your team when reaching those goals?
Yeah, great question as well. Look, I would always, I think it's really important to celebrate success, and I would do that. I can't, I think obviously the old Irish thing is go for a couple of drinks or something like that. But for me, it was kind of taking stock and yeah, I can't give you a particular example of what I would do. I do remember in Davis Cup, actually, we won a match, or we won a tie, and one of the guys said I actually wanted to race out there and go to another tournament. And one of the guys said to me, he said, look, these are the moments you're going to remember when you retire, when you stop playing, and you need to celebrate that. And we did, and he's right, like I don't remember, I went to Turkey the week after. I don't remember really that event, but I remember, representing Ireland and winning, so I think it's a good point. And I think in terms of teams and companies, I think it's really important to recognize success, or recognize effort and hard work and so on, and to acknowledge people. And I think a lot of people, the power of actually pulling someone aside and saying, well done and thank you. It's and Branson has written publicly around the kind of the power of a handwritten note. You know, I think people like to feel appreciated, and we should recognize our teams for their hard work, especially, you know, given the current climate. We're working really hard and trying to do a lot, and to actually recognize them is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. And it reminds me again, another speaker we had at one of our keynote events last year called the Big Leader Summit, Damien Brown, who was a retired professional.
Yeah, I know Damien as well. Yeah.
Damien, yeah, who rode most of us know, he rode the Atlantic Ocean single-handedly. Took him over 60 days.
Yeah.
And in terms of the rewards, he practiced delayed gratification, and basically every Sunday he had a little box of treats, like celebrations, mini, you know, chocolates, and it was a Sunday treat, and he had to row and row and row all those other days, and something to report if he made it another week on. Principle. We're doing really well here. We've got about 6-7 minutes left to go, guys. Seamus is asking you, and again, enjoys the presentation. I think we all have very practical, open, honest, and he wonders what do you do on a day off?
Yeah, I've actually in the COVID climate kind of got into hiking and getting out and about, and doing that. Got into baking as well. Haven't made any banana bread or anything yet, but so yeah, on a day off I read a lot as well. Like I like to read, and I like the outdoors. I mean, I think I was saying to you, I don't know if people were on the call at this stage, but I do miss playing tennis. Like, so, you know, I like playing, and I've recently started playing a lot of paddle tennis as well, which is kind of a different version of tennis. So I like to be active, something kind of out and about. But I am in the current climate, I am missing the ability to go and play tennis, or to, you know, go further than 5K and go for a hike. But
absolutely, I relate to that. I'm nowhere near your standard, but God, I miss the court as well. Many of us do. Yeah, great stuff. About another 2 or 3 minutes to go. Can I ask you a question on values? And I noted the name of the author there.
Yeah, Betty, you're right. Yeah,
you're right. Maybe if I just share with you a little bit about my thing about values, and then leading the question to you. A few years ago, I was doing a diploma in leadership, and there was a module on ethics and values, and I look at that and says, what has that got to do with this? I was highly skeptical, thinking this is about making money and enjoying yourself and da 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 da. Suffice to say, having read all the material and followed the module, it was my eureka moment. It was, this is the whole thing. It's about your purpose and your values, and why are you doing what you're doing. So like, and it features some of the people you mentioned, like Pat Lam and Connacht and your basketball friend, you know, like that. This is why it's so key. My question for you, James, is at what point in your journey did the values thing enter into your head, or the conversation that this is actually important? Was it late in the day, or was it from early on?
It's like you're asking me a very good question. Like I think it was a gradual thing. I think so. In my background, I think so. My coach, who I mentioned, Larry Jervich, was very big on kind of thinking big and kind of going after your goals and all that stuff. So he had a big impact. And then I have a brother that had a spinal injury accident when I was 16. Or sorry, I was 15 and he was 17. And that had a huge impact on me, in that, you know, I kind of looked at that and thought, and I think it wasn't, I don't know if it was a eureka moment, but I think it was a gradual thing where I thought, you know, life is short. You know, we all have stuff we go through and things happen. And for me, it was, look, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I want to, you know, without sounding really philosophical and hairy-fairy, but like, I want to do something I enjoy doing, basically. And I want to do something I love doing, and who knows what's around the corner. You've one life, you may as well, you know, I don't want to do something I hate, basically. So I think it was kind of a gradual thing. And then the people I met along the way, I think, you know, I actually, in terms of my Necker experience and going out there, I remember in 2015 when I first went, I would meet someone, I'd meet a business person who sold their company for 500 million. And I just think, oh my God, this person is amazing. But then I actually kind of going there a lot, I came to a realization that there's a lot of really, really financially successful people who aren't that happy, you know, and some of those people weren't. And there's a lot of financially successful people that are incredibly happy. And I think one of the cornerstone pieces is their values and how they want to live their life and so on. So I think I definitely kind of had a journey around that, for want of a better word.
Yeah, and I take it that Branson is firmly in the latter camp of very happy soul in his own, happy in his own skin.
Yeah, I mean, like on that, I think I asked him if he would retire, and he said no, he'd never retire. He loves what he does, and you know, he's so kind of obsessed at the moment, Virgin Galactic and so on. And then he invites this dentist and a guy who works in finance, who's good friends of his, and the dentist was telling me that they were on a boat and they saw the founder of Google, who owns another island there, and he made the joke saying, "Oh, I'll have my boat in a year or two or something." And he said, Richard said to him, "You know, you've got a beautiful wife and family, and so, you know, it's not everything, basically." Which I know sounds, you know, it sounds a bit hairy-fairy, but when you spend time with him, you can see that he's just a nice, fun person.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys,
can I ask one last question, Carl? Yeah. Thank you, James, very much. Great presentation. It's just, I recall looking back, I used to follow the Irish tennis results for many years, and you'd look at them on the Monday and the Tuesday, and you'd see that there were, you know, there were defeats maybe for a lot of the Irish players in the very early rounds, and at times yourself, James, you get knocked out after being in Israel or Turkey or some foreign place. You get knocked out in the first round, and I'd nearly feel the pain of how demoralized after traveling so far, and then get knocked out in the first round, and then having to travel on another long journey. How did you cope with that in terms of resilience and getting yourself back into shape again for the next tournament?
Yeah, like I think it was all around the vision, and it was kind of, yeah, like I knew where I wanted to get to, and there's going to be knocks around on the way, and it was just recognizing that. And I think, you know, in tennis and in sport, you have to have a short memory, particularly tennis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless you're Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, you're not winning every week usually. So it was always around trying to take the positives from the performance and looking at the match and looking what you did well, and I suppose taking the positives and moving forward. But it wasn't easy. A lot of the time for me, it was harder when you'd stay in the same place. It was better to kind of leave and feel like you were kind of starting again, a new week, you know. But I definitely something that I've, you know, in terms of relating to business, you know, we miss business deals and so on, and it's kind of building that resilience as we go.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, James.
Thanks very much, Christy. So, folks, it's bang on. It's just gone 11 o'clock. We promised we'd stick to the time. So what I'm going to do is actually formally wrap it here, but just to say that there's some good interaction. If somebody wants to stay on for another 2 or 3 minutes, myself and James are certainly okay to keep the conversation going, certainly to maybe 5, 10 past 11. But at this stage, because I know a lot of you have to get on with things, can I firstly thank you all for your excellent interaction, participation, and particularly James for just a brilliant presentation. I could listen to you all day. And what I said at the start was, this is the first in our new series of Game Changers, and our next event is already lined up, and we have the I think he's 6 times and certainly 5 in a row All-Ireland winning medal Johnny Cooper from the Dubs is going to be presenting on the morning of Monday the 7th of December. The same general topic, but a different specific theme to get some insights into what's given the Dubs the edge and how he personally applies that. So please, it's available to book on our website. You're all welcome to jump on. So at this stage, guys, thank you ever so much again for your interaction. One thing that James talked about was the importance of feedback. We need your feedback, please do. And thanks very much for the really, really nice comments that we're getting here. But we will send you a quick, rapid fire questionnaire, as we always do from these events. How can we do it better? What did you enjoy? Because this is the start of a long series called Game Changers. So thank you ever so much. I really, really appreciate it. And somebody's asking, will we be able to send the slides? Yes, of course.
Yeah, of course. And if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do as well. And the last thing I'll say is, I think I sent it on to you, Carl, but I'm hosting an event with someone the end of November, a webinar myself. If people want to attend, it's a free webinar. You can jump in.
That's right. Yeah, we'll put that up. Okay, so if you have to jump, we understand, as I do myself in a couple of minutes, but if anybody else wants to fire a final question or two, please do. Seamus, you have a question?
No, just thanks. Thanks very much, James. Excellent. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Seamus.
Thanks.
Thanks a million, guys. Another quick one, James. You mentioned that you always keep a journal. How long have you been doing that, and what is the benefit of it?
Yeah, like I've been doing it for the last. So I did it when I played tennis as well. I would kind of write about my matches and about, like, I suppose actually I probably should have said that with in terms of Christie's last question, that I would always, after a match, I'd always write down kind of things I did well and things I can improve and so on, and try and take the learnings from it. So I don't want to say I've always kept a journal, but and I wouldn't religiously write in it every day, being completely honest, but I definitely, you know, when I meet people and I spend time with business people and sports people and so on, I keep notes on what I learned. And so, like, when I went and did my pre-season camp in India, I would have taken the drills that the coach had done. I would have wrote down little things that the players would have said and so on. And then in terms of spending time on Necker, would have the business people or the people that I've met there, what are the lessons I learned from them? Say Dr. Betty, the Internal Boardroom, I'd say, oh, that's interesting, and jot it down. So I wouldn't be kind of every night writing Dear Diary, but I would take a lot of notes in terms of lessons.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, because I know, like I've heard that I find successful people will refer to that it's the jotting it down, and particularly for goal setting and affirmation. Like Jerry Duffy's very strong on that.
Yeah. And I also think in terms of goals, like writing them out as opposed to typing it, I think it's powerful when you actually, you know, use a pen and write as opposed to, you know, typing things. You know, or I would type them, but then I like using a pen to kind of cross things off, to feel like I've and I would make lists a lot in terms of tasks I have to do and so on. So I would be, I would be very conscious of that. And I think you know, one of the guys, I can't remember who used the quote, but it's success leaves clues. So it was always, you know, what things can I pick up from someone? And one interesting business person said to me was, you know, around the time of Steve Jobs, it was like when Steve Jobs died, I think everyone wanted to be Steve Jobs. And he was saying, like, not everyone is Steve Jobs, you know, and like, you shouldn't, again, back to your values pieces, like, you shouldn't try and be someone you're not, but you shouldn't try and be a leader, you know, or kind of, you shouldn't fake something, but picking up the lessons from people and almost putting your own interpretation around them and your own values, I think, is the way to go.
I would agree with that, James. I think bringing your own identity to your business is very important, but learning from others and developing good values is the way to go.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, I think you're right.
Great stuff.
Fabulous. So, guys, we've had a really good run at it. So again, just to thank everybody, really appreciate your time and attention. And I know from the comments, we've got some fantastic responses, and you've all really enjoyed it. And do stay with us. I say this is the first step on a long journey for us. Christy and myself are trying to we're leading the charge from within the network, but we're pushing an open door, aren't we? There's great belief in this concept, and we see this as a small step onto something great. So we're not just dipping in and out for a one-hit wonder here. This is we're going to keep going with this series and build on it and expand on it. And we're updating ideas, as we say, in terms of how we can make it better. Anything to add to that, Christy?
No, just as I said, it's the start of this, and you know, we intend to have other, I suppose, levels in terms of sport and business and the lessons from both, and eventually maybe looking at linking up on the academic side in trying to develop something. And I know Carol is very keen on this, is doing something on the academic links with universities on something in sports leadership. And I think any views anybody has on that, and even yourself, James, would greatly be appreciated.
Yeah, happy to help in any way. I think it's great, yeah, and it's very relevant in terms of obviously the lessons and relating it to the business world.
Yeah, okay. Guys, we will share this presentation. It's available for people. So I know a lot of people couldn't make it on. So anybody you think can benefit from it, please do spread the word. Okay. So folks, let's call it. Thanks a million again, James. Thanks everyone.
No worries, thank you. And yeah, as I said, anyone wants to reach out, please, you get me on LinkedIn, and thanks again for asking me to do this, and happy to help in any way. Free
invite to Necker Island next year.
Yeah, we'll have it. Yeah, I'd say the attendance to go up. You have a competition. You have an exam.
Fair enough.
It is fair to be coming then, Carl.
Bye. See you.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, guys.
Talk soon. Thank you.
Take care. Cheers. Bye. Bye.